The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as staff members hurried through the corridors, making final preparations for one of the most significant visits in recent royal history. Queen Elizabeth II, now in her 90s, stood at her private study window, watching the careful choreography of security teams and protocol officers below. Today would mark another chapter in her remarkable relationship with American presidents. But this visit felt different somehow. The Queen had hosted many world leaders throughout her 7-decade reign, but few had captured the public imagination quite like Barack Obama. Their friendship had blossomed during his presidency, beginning with that memorable first meeting at Buckingham Palace in 2009. She remembered how nervous he had seemed then, this young senator from Chicago who had risen to become the leader of the free world. Now, years after leaving office, he was returning not as a president, but as a friend. Prince Philip, despite his advanced age, insisted on being present for the arrival. He had developed his own fondness for the Obamas during their previous encounters. The Duke of Edinburgh appreciated Barack's intellect and wit, while Michelle's warmth and authenticity had won over even the most traditional members of the royal household. Staff often spoke of how she had effortlessly connected with everyone from senior courtiers to kitchen staff during their previous visits. The castle itself seemed to anticipate the importance of the occasion. Windsor had been the Queen's favorite residence, a place where she felt most at home among the centuries of royal history. The state apartments had been prepared with meticulous care, fresh flowers arranged in every room, and the finest china and crystal brought out for the occasion. The menu had been carefully planned to blend British tradition with subtle nods to American tastes. Security preparations had been extensive, but discreet. Despite no longer holding office, Barack Obama remained under Secret Service protection, and coordinating this with the Queen's own security detail had required weeks of planning. The normally bustling tourist areas of Windsor had been quietly restricted, creating an atmosphere of anticipation throughout the town. Lady Susan Hussey, one of the Queen's longest-serving ladies-in-waiting, had worked closely with the Obama team to ensure every detail was perfect. She had been particularly impressed by Michelle Obama's grace during their previous interactions and had taken special care in planning activities that would allow for meaningful conversation and connection. The informality that the Obamas brought to diplomatic occasions had always been refreshing, she thought. The Queen's private secretary had briefed her on recent developments in the Obamas' post-White House lives. Barack's memoir had become a best-selling phenomenon, while Michelle's book had inspired millions around the world. Their production company was creating content that reflected their values and commitment to public service. The Queen found their transition from the highest office in America to private citizenship both graceful and admirable. As the morning progressed, final touches were added throughout the castle. The round tower, visible from miles away, stood as a symbol of British monarchy stretching back nearly 1,000 years. Today, it would witness another moment in the ongoing story of Anglo-American friendship, one that transcended politics and protocol to touch something deeper about human connection across cultures and generations. The Queen's dresser helped her select an outfit that struck the right tone, formal enough to honor the significance of the occasion, but warm enough to reflect the genuine friendship that had developed over the years. She chose a bright blue ensemble, knowing that photographs from the day would be scrutinized by media around the world. Every detail mattered, not just for protocol, but because this visit represented something special in her personal relationships with world leaders. In the castle's private dining room, staff made final adjustments to table settings that would host intimate conversations between old friends. The Queen had specifically requested that lunch be served in a smaller, more personal space rather than one of the grand state dining rooms. This wasn't about diplomatic ceremony. It was about genuine connection and the kind of friendship that transcended official positions and titles. The approach to Windsor Castle by car offers visitors their first glimpse of royal grandeur, and the Queen knew that even the well-traveled Obamas would be struck by the sight. The long walk stretches for miles, offering an unobstructed view of the castle's imposing facade. On clear days like this, the view was particularly spectacular, with the ancient stones seeming to glow in the English sunshine. Prince Charles had also cleared his schedule to join the lunch, bringing along Camilla, who had developed her own warm relationship with Michelle Obama. The Duchess of Cornwall appreciated Michelle's commitment to literacy and education, causes close to her own heart. Their previous conversations about books and reading had revealed shared passions that went well beyond their public roles. The Queen's corgis, always sensitive to changes in household routine, seemed to sense the importance of the day. They had been gently corralled to avoid any diplomatic incidents, though the Queen knew that Barack had always been comfortable around her beloved dogs. During one memorable previous visit, he had been photographed playing with them on the palace lawns, images that had delighted dog lovers around the world. Staff members who had worked previous Obama visits spoke excitedly among themselves about the return of their favorite American guests. The Obamas had always taken time to acknowledge and thank the people who made royal entertaining possible, from chefs to footmen to security personnel. This attention to everyone around them, regardless of rank or position, had made them genuinely beloved within royal circles. The Queen reflected on how much the world had changed since Barack Obama first entered the Oval Office. Through economic crisis, international tensions, and domestic challenges, their friendship had remained constant. She had watched him navigate the pressures of the presidency with grace and dignity, always maintaining the warmth and humor that had characterized their personal interactions. As the final minutes before arrival ticked away, the Queen took one last look around her beloved castle. The building had hosted kings and queens, prime ministers, and presidents, but today felt uniquely special. Sometimes the most meaningful diplomatic moments happened not in grand ceremonial settings, but in quiet conversations between friends who had come to trust and respect each other deeply. The sound of vehicles approaching on the gravel drive signaled that the Obama motorcade was finally arriving. The Queen made her way to the entrance, prepared to welcome back two people who had become far more than diplomatic contacts over the years of their acquaintance. Today would be about friendship, shared experiences, and the kind of genuine human connection that makes all the protocol and ceremony worthwhile. The black motorcade wound its way through Windsor's historic streets, drawing curious glances from residents who had grown accustomed to royal visitors, but still found excitement in spotting famous faces. Inside the lead vehicle, Barack Obama gazed out at the familiar English countryside, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. Beside him, Michelle adjusted her elegant dress and smiled at the memory of their previous visits to this remarkable castle. Their daughter Malia had once described Windsor Castle as looking like something from a fairy tale, and Barack had to admit she wasn't wrong. Even after years of visiting palaces and official residences around the world, there was something uniquely magical about approaching this ancient fortress that had been home to British monarchs for nearly 1,000 years. The sheer scale and history of the place never failed to impress him. Michelle pointed out landmarks she remembered from their previous visit: the famous Round Tower, the state apartments where they had dined with the royal family, the gardens where they had walked with the Queen and Prince Philip. She had always felt remarkably comfortable at royal occasions, despite their formal nature. The Queen's genuine warmth had made what could have been intimidating experiences feel natural and welcoming. As they passed through the castle gates, Barack reflected on how much his life had changed since leaving the presidency. The constant pressure of decision-making had lifted, replaced by the freedom to choose his own schedule and priorities. Yet some relationships formed during his time in office had endured and deepened, none more so than his friendship with the British royal family. The Secret Service agents traveling with them maintained their professional alertness, but even they seemed more relaxed than during official state visits. This was a private lunch between friends, though the security requirements remained substantial. The coordination between American and British protection teams had become seamless over the years, a testament to the strong alliance between the two nations. Michelle thought about her own relationship with the Queen, which had surprised many observers with its genuine warmth. Despite coming from completely different worlds, they had found common ground in their shared experiences of public service and the unique pressures that came with their positions. The Queen's advice about handling media scrutiny had proven invaluable during challenging moments in the White House. The motorcade came to a stop in the castle's quadrangle, where a small group of senior staff waited to greet them. The absence of military bands and formal ceremony made this arrival feel more intimate than their previous visits. This was exactly what Barack had hoped for, a chance to reconnect as people rather than as public figures playing prescribed diplomatic roles. Prince Philip emerged from the castle entrance, moving more slowly than in previous encounters, but still maintaining his characteristic dignity and sharp wit. Barack had always enjoyed his conversations with the Duke of Edinburgh, who possessed a unique perspective on decades of world events and wasn't shy about sharing his opinions. Despite his advancing age, Philip's mind remained razor-sharp and his humor intact. The Queen appeared moments later, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing her American friends again. She moved with the grace of someone who had perfected the art of public appearances over 7 decades. But her smile held the warmth of personal affection. Barack noticed that despite her age, she remained remarkably energetic and engaged, her famous handbag positioned, as always, at the perfect angle. Michelle stepped forward for the traditional greeting, remembering the protocol lessons that had once seemed so foreign but now felt natural. The Queen had always been patient with American informality, understanding that different cultures approached official interactions in their own ways. What mattered was not perfect adherence to centuries-old traditions, but the genuine respect and friendship that had developed over time. The brief photo opportunity captured images that would be shared around the world within hours, but for the participants, it felt like old friends reuniting rather than a diplomatic event. Barack's easy smile and Michelle's elegant poise complemented the Queen's regal bearing perfectly, creating pictures that conveyed both the importance of Anglo-American relations and the human warmth underlying formal alliances. Prince Charles joined the group, bringing with him the Duchess of Cornwall, who embraced Michelle warmly. Camilla had been looking forward to continuing conversations about their shared interests in literacy and education. Their previous discussions about the power of books to transform lives had revealed a deep philosophical connection that transcended their very different backgrounds and experiences. As the group moved inside the castle, Barack marveled once again at the seamless blend of ancient architecture and modern comfort that characterized Windsor. The Queen had mastered the art of making guests feel welcome in surroundings that could easily have felt museum-like or intimidating. Somehow she managed to make a castle feel like a home, albeit an extraordinarily grand one. The conversation flowed naturally as they walked through corridors lined with priceless paintings and artifacts. The Queen pointed out pieces that had particular historical significance, sharing stories that brought centuries-old objects to life. Her knowledge of the castle's history was encyclopedic, but she shared it with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved both the building and its stories. Michelle found herself drawn once again to the Queen's genuine curiosity about American politics and society. Despite having met countless world leaders over the decades, the Queen continued to ask thoughtful questions about contemporary issues, seeking to understand different perspectives and experiences. Her intelligence and engagement remained as sharp as ever, even as she approached her centenary. The security teams melted discreetly into the background, positioned to ensure safety while remaining invisible to the casual observer. The Secret Service agents had worked with British protection officers many times before and had developed both professional respect and personal friendships. This collaborative approach reflected the broader relationship between the two nations. Staff members they passed in the corridors smiled with genuine pleasure at seeing the Obamas return to Windsor. Word had spread through the castle that the former first couple had arrived, and there was a palpable sense of excitement among those who remembered their previous visits fondly. The Obamas had always taken time to acknowledge and thank the people who made royal entertaining possible. As they approached the private dining room where lunch would be served, Barack felt grateful for the opportunity to reconnect with people who had become genuinely important to him. The transition from the presidency to private life had been smoother than he had expected, partly because relationships like this one had endured beyond his time in office. Some friendships transcended politics and protocol, becoming something more valuable and lasting. The Queen paused before entering the dining room, taking a moment to ensure that everyone felt comfortable and welcome. This attention to the emotional well-being of her guests, rather than just the procedural requirements of hospitality, exemplified why she had remained such an effective monarch for so many decades. She understood that successful diplomacy often depended more on human connection than formal ceremony. The private dining room at Windsor Castle had been transformed into an intimate setting that felt more like a family gathering than a diplomatic luncheon. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the carefully chosen floral arrangements and the gleaming silverware that had been polished to perfection. The Queen had specifically requested this smaller, more personal space over the grand state dining rooms, wanting to create an atmosphere where genuine conversation could flourish. As they settled into their seats, Barack Obama found himself seated to the Queen's right, a position of honor that reflected both protocol and genuine affection. Michelle was positioned where she could easily engage with both Camilla and Prince Charles, allowing for the natural flow of conversation that had characterized their previous encounters. Prince Philip, despite his age, had insisted on joining them and brought his characteristic wit to the gathering. The menu had been carefully crafted to blend British culinary traditions with subtle nods to American preferences. The Queen's chefs had remembered Barack's fondness for certain dishes from their previous visits, and had incorporated these into a meal that felt both formal and personal. Each course was served with the precision that royal dining demanded, yet the atmosphere remained relaxed and conversational. Michelle found herself once again impressed by the Queen's genuine curiosity about contemporary American life. Her Majesty asked thoughtful questions about their post-White House projects, showing particular interest in their production company and the stories they were choosing to tell. The Queen had always understood the power of narrative to shape public opinion and appreciated their commitment to uplifting and inspiring content. Barack shared stories about his memoir writing process, describing the challenge of distilling 8 years of complex decisions into a coherent narrative. The Queen listened with the attention of someone who had witnessed countless historical moments firsthand and understood the difficulty of capturing the full complexity of leadership experiences. Her own perspective on decades of political change added depth to their discussion. Prince Philip, true to form, offered a reverent commentary on various world leaders they had all encountered over the years. His observations, while sometimes pointed, were delivered with the humor of someone who had seen enough of human nature to take a philosophical view of political personalities. Barack appreciated the Duke's directness, which provided a refreshing contrast to the carefully measured language of most diplomatic encounters. The conversation turned to their children and the challenges of raising young people in the public eye. Michelle spoke about Malia and Sasha's transition to independent young adults, while the Queen shared her own reflections on watching her children and grandchildren navigate their own paths. Despite the vast differences in their circumstances, they found common ground in the universal experiences of parenthood and family life. Prince Charles contributed his thoughts on environmental issues, a passion that aligned closely with concerns Barack had championed during his presidency. Their discussion of climate change and conservation efforts revealed shared values that transcended national boundaries. The future king's long-standing commitment to environmental causes had earned him respect from world leaders who might otherwise have been skeptical of royal involvement in policy matters. Camilla and Michelle continued their ongoing conversation about literacy initiatives, sharing ideas about programs that could reach underserved communities. The Duchess of Cornwall's work with reading programs had paralleled Michelle's educational advocacy in interesting ways, and both women had discovered the power of personal storytelling to inspire others. Their collaboration had extended beyond formal diplomatic channels into genuine partnership. The Queen's famous corgis made a brief appearance, carefully supervised to ensure they didn't disrupt the meal, but present enough to remind everyone of Her Majesty's famous love for her canine companions. Barack had always enjoyed the dog's presence during his visits, finding their relaxed acceptance of royal grandeur somehow reassuring. The pets added an element of normalcy to an otherwise extraordinary setting. As the meal progressed, the conversation flowed between serious topics and lighter moments with a natural rhythm of old friends catching up. They discussed recent books they had read, movies they had enjoyed, and places they hoped to visit. These personal exchanges, while seemingly trivial, actually strengthened the bonds of friendship and trust that made broader diplomatic cooperation possible. The Queen shared her thoughts on the changing nature of monarchy in the modern world, acknowledging challenges while expressing confidence in the institution's ability to adapt and remain relevant. Barack found her perspective fascinating as someone who had successfully navigated decades of social and political transformation while maintaining the essential character of her role. Her wisdom came not from books, but from lived experience of unprecedented change. Michelle spoke about her ongoing work with girls' education globally, describing projects that had grown out of initiatives begun during her time as First Lady. The Queen expressed particular interest in efforts to reach young women in regions where educational opportunities remained limited. Her own long-standing interest in Commonwealth education programs provided common ground for discussing practical approaches to expanding access to learning. The meal itself showcased the best of British cuisine, prepared with a skill that had made the royal kitchens famous among visiting dignitaries. Each dish was presented with elegant simplicity that allowed the quality of ingredients and preparation to speak for itself. The wine selection complemented the food perfectly while facilitating the kind of relaxed conversation that made diplomatic relationships genuinely productive. Staff members moved through the room with practiced efficiency, ensuring that every need was met while remaining virtually invisible. Their professionalism allowed the conversation to flow naturally without the interruptions that could disrupt intimate discussions. The Obamas had always been impressed by the seamless service that characterized royal entertaining, understanding the years of training and dedication required to achieve such excellence. Prince Philip regaled them with stories from his naval career, drawing parallels between leadership challenges in military service and civilian government. His experiences commanding ships in wartime provided unique insights into decision-making under pressure that resonated with Barack's own presidential experiences. The Duke's perspective spanned decades of technological and social change that few people had witnessed so directly. The Queen's knowledge of American history impressed her guests once again as she referenced events and personalities from across centuries of Anglo-American relations. Her understanding went far beyond what might be expected from briefing papers, reflecting genuine study and interest in the nation that had become Britain's closest ally. This deep knowledge made her observations particularly valuable and insightful. As lunch drew toward its conclusion, there was a sense of reluctance to end what had been a particularly enjoyable gathering. The combination of excellent food, beautiful surroundings, and stimulating conversation had created exactly the kind of experience that strengthened personal relationships between nations. These informal moments often proved more valuable for long-term cooperation than formal summit meetings or state dinners. After the satisfying conclusion of lunch, the Queen suggested a private tour of the castle's state apartments, areas that held particular historical significance, and offered opportunities for more intimate conversation. The group moved through corridors lined with portraits of monarchs spanning centuries, each painting telling part of the story of British royal history. Barack found himself fascinated by the continuity these images represented, an unbroken chain of leadership stretching back through centuries of change and challenge. The Queen's knowledge of each room and artifact was extraordinary, delivered with the passion of someone who genuinely loved both the history and the building itself. She paused before paintings and furniture pieces, sharing stories that brought dry historical facts to life. Her anecdotes revealed not just dates and names, but the human drama behind major events, offering perspectives that could never be found in textbooks or documentaries. Michelle was particularly drawn to portraits of influential royal women throughout history, noting how their roles and public presentation had evolved over the centuries. The Queen offered thoughtful observations about the changing expectations placed on women in public life, drawing from her own unique experience of adapting to social transformation while maintaining institutional traditions. Their discussion revealed shared understanding of the particular challenges faced by women in leadership positions. In the magnificent St. George's Hall, Prince Philip pointed out damage from the devastating 1992 fire that had destroyed much of this part of the castle. He described the painstaking restoration process that had brought the room back to its current splendor, a project that had taken years to complete and had required the skills of master craftsmen from across Britain. The restored ceiling was particularly impressive, demonstrating traditional techniques that few contemporary builders possessed. Prince Charles spoke passionately about the conservation efforts required to maintain such an ancient building, explaining how modern technology was being used to preserve historical structures for future generations. His interest in architecture and traditional building methods had led to innovations in heritage preservation that were being applied to historic buildings throughout the Commonwealth. Barack appreciated the prince's commitment to balancing preservation with practical necessity. The Queen led them into her private sitting room, a space that felt remarkably homely despite its grand surroundings. Family photographs sat alongside priceless antiques, creating an atmosphere that managed to be both regal and personal. Michelle noticed pictures from various state visits over the years, including several featuring American presidents and their families stretching back decades of diplomatic relationship. This more intimate setting encouraged deeper conversation about the personal costs and rewards of public service. The Queen spoke candidly about the sacrifices required by life in the public eye, acknowledging challenges while expressing genuine satisfaction with her role's opportunities to serve others. Barack found her perspective particularly valuable, given that few people had navigated the pressures of public leadership for as long or as successfully as she had. They discussed the rapid pace of technological change and its impact on both governance and personal privacy. The Queen's adaptation to social media and digital communication had been remarkable for someone of her generation, though she admitted to finding some aspects of contemporary media culture bewildering. Michelle shared her own struggles with online criticism and the challenge of maintaining authenticity while protecting family privacy. Prince Philip contributed his characteristic blunt assessments of various technological developments, expressing skepticism about some modern innovations while acknowledging others that had genuinely improved life quality. His perspective as someone who had witnessed the transformation from pre-digital to fully connected society provided unique insights into the pace and implications of change. Barack found the Duke's observations both amusing and surprisingly insightful. The conversation turned to the Commonwealth and its evolving role in global affairs. The Queen's dedication to this association of nations had been one of her defining commitments throughout her reign, and she spoke enthusiastically about recent initiatives to strengthen cooperation between member countries. Barack's own experience with international organizations gave him appreciation for the delicate diplomatic work required to maintain such partnerships. Camilla shared stories from her recent visits to Commonwealth countries, describing projects that were making real differences in education and healthcare access. Her enthusiasm for these programs was infectious, and Michelle found herself drawn into discussions about potential collaboration between their various charitable initiatives. The possibility of combining their different platforms and resources to achieve greater impact was exciting for both women. They walked through rooms where crucial historical decisions had been made, where monarchs had met with prime ministers to discuss matters of war and peace. The Queen's descriptions of these meetings brought alive the weight of responsibility that had rested on her predecessor's shoulders. Barack reflected on his own experience of making decisions that would affect millions of lives, finding comfort in the continuity of leadership challenges across centuries. The castle's library provided another opportunity for meaningful exchange, as all members of the group shared a love of reading and learning. The Queen's literary tastes were wide-ranging, and she was particularly interested in Barack's recommendations for contemporary American authors. Their discussion of books revealed shared intellectual curiosity that transcended their different backgrounds and generations. Prince Charles spoke about his own writing projects, including his thoughts on environmental stewardship and traditional craftsmanship. His books had reached audiences well beyond those typically interested in royal perspectives, and Barack was impressed by the prince's commitment to using his platform to advance causes he believed in. Their exchange of ideas about effective advocacy revealed common approaches despite their different political systems. The afternoon light streaming through ancient windows created an almost magical atmosphere as they moved through rooms that had hosted countless significant gatherings over the centuries. Michelle found herself thinking about all the women who had walked these same corridors, facing their own challenges and opportunities in very different eras. The continuity of human experience across time periods seemed particularly vivid in this setting. Security personnel maintained their discreet presence throughout the tour, but their familiarity with the castle and its routines allowed them to blend seamlessly into the background. The successful coordination between British and American protection teams had become a model for international cooperation, reflecting the broader alliance between their nations. Professional relationships built through these collaborations often lasted years beyond individual assignments. The Queen's energy and enthusiasm remained remarkable throughout the extended visit, dispelling any concerns about the demands such occasions might place on someone of her age. Her genuine enjoyment of intellectual conversation and human connection seemed to energize rather than tire her. Barack admired her continued engagement with complex issues and her obvious pleasure in hosting people she had come to consider friends. As they concluded the private tour, there was a sense of having shared something special beyond the usual diplomatic exchange. The combination of magnificent surroundings, fascinating history, and genuine friendship had created an experience that would be remembered by all participants long after the formal aspects of the visit had faded. These personal connections between leaders often proved more valuable than any formal agreement or treaty. As the afternoon drew toward its close, the Queen suggested they step out onto the East Terrace, where the gardens of Windsor Castle stretched into the distance under the soft English sunshine. The view from this elevated position encompassed acres of perfectly maintained grounds, with a long walk extending toward Windsor Great Park in one direction and the private gardens closer to the castle walls providing a more intimate landscape in another. The fresh air and beautiful scenery provided the perfect setting for the final portion of their visit, allowing for relaxed conversation without the formal atmosphere that indoor settings sometimes imposed. Barack breathed deeply, appreciating both the pristine air and the sense of peace that seemed to surround Windsor Castle despite its proximity to London and all the pressures of modern life. Michelle found herself thinking about how different this experience was from their first royal encounter years earlier, when protocol and nervousness had dominated their thoughts. Now, walking casually alongside the Queen and her family felt natural and comfortable, a testament to the genuine friendships that had developed over years of diplomatic interaction. The evolution of their relationship reflected broader changes in how modern diplomacy could transcend formal boundaries. Prince Philip, despite his advanced age, seemed energized by the outdoor setting and pointed out various features of the gardens with obvious pride. His involvement in landscaping and conservation projects at royal residences had been one of his less publicized but deeply meaningful contributions over the decades. Barack appreciated the Duke's detailed knowledge of everything from tree species to drainage systems that kept the grounds in perfect condition. The Queen's love for the outdoors was evident as she moved comfortably through her gardens, stopping occasionally to examine plants or comment on seasonal changes. Her connection to the natural world had always been strong, from her famous love of horses to her interest in agriculture on royal estates. This aspect of her personality often surprised people who knew her only through formal public appearances. Prince Charles joined the conversation about environmental conservation with his characteristic passion, describing sustainable practices being implemented across royal properties. His long-standing commitment to organic farming and renewable energy had been ahead of its time when he began advocating for these approaches decades earlier. Barack found their discussion particularly relevant given his own continued work on climate issues. Camilla pointed out specific flowers and plants that held particular meaning for her, sharing stories about garden design and the therapeutic value of spending time among growing things. Her enthusiasm for horticulture had grown over the years, providing both personal satisfaction and opportunities to support related charitable causes. Michelle appreciated learning about this more personal side of the Duchess's interests and activities. The conversation naturally turned to their families and the joy of watching children and grandchildren develop their own interests and independence. The Queen spoke warmly about her great-grandchildren and the pleasure of seeing them discover the world around them. Barack shared similar sentiments about watching Malia and Sasha grow into confident young women with their own goals and perspectives. They discussed travel and the places around the world that had left lasting impressions on each of them. The Queen's travels as monarch had taken her to virtually every corner of the Commonwealth and beyond, while the Obamas' experiences had provided them with deep appreciation for different cultures and approaches to common human challenges. These shared experiences of international engagement created another bond between them. Security personnel positioned themselves discreetly around the garden perimeter, allowing their principals to enjoy the outdoor setting while maintaining necessary protection. The coordination between teams had become so smooth over the years that security concerns rarely intruded on the natural flow of such gatherings. Professional competence enabled personal connection to flourish within appropriate safety parameters. The afternoon light began to take on the golden quality that makes English gardens particularly beautiful in late day, casting long shadows across the perfectly maintained lawns and highlighting the colors of seasonal plantings. Michelle captured mental images of these moments, knowing that such experiences were precious and should be remembered in detail long after formal photographs have been filed away. They paused at a memorial garden dedicated to Princess Diana, where the Queen shared memories of her former daughter-in-law, with a kind of warmth and affection that revealed the genuine grief the royal family had experienced at her loss. Barack was struck by Her Majesty's ability to speak personally about painful subjects while maintaining the dignity that her position required. The conversation touched on legacy and the importance of using whatever platform life provided to make positive differences for others. All members of the group had wrestled with questions about how best to serve during their years in prominent positions, and they found common ground in their commitment to continued service even as their official roles evolved. These shared values created understanding that transcended political or cultural differences. Prince Philip offered his characteristic observations about human nature and the amusing contradictions he had observed in decades of public life. His wit remained sharp despite his age, and his willingness to speak candidly about both absurdities and profound truths in public service provided entertainment and insight in equal measure. Barack had always enjoyed the Duke's unvarnished perspective on world events and personalities. As the time came for departure, there was genuine reluctance to end what had been an extraordinary day of friendship and conversation. The combination of magnificent surroundings, excellent hospitality, and stimulating company had created exactly the kind of experience that made diplomatic relationships personally meaningful rather than merely professional obligations. Such gatherings strengthened international cooperation in ways that formal negotiations could never achieve. The walk back toward the castle entrance provided final opportunities for private conversation and personal exchanges that would be remembered long after public aspects of the visit had been documented and filed away. Barack reflected on how fortunate he had been to develop friendships that had outlasted his time in office, providing continued opportunities for learning and growth. The farewell process was both formal and heartfelt, with embraces and expressions of mutual affection that clearly went beyond diplomatic courtesy. The Queen's genuine warmth in saying goodbye reflected the real friendship that had developed over years of interaction, while promises to stay in touch carried the weight of sincere intention rather than mere politeness. As the Obama motorcade prepared to depart Windsor Castle, both Barack and Michelle looked back at the ancient building with gratitude for the experiences they had shared there over the years. The castle represented not just British history and tradition, but also the possibility of meaningful human connection across cultural and generational divides. Their friendship with the royal family had enriched their lives in ways that went far beyond diplomatic advantage. The Queen stood watching from the castle entrance until the motorcade disappeared from view, her own reflection encompassing decades of similar farewells with world leaders who had become genuine friends. Some relationships forged in the course of official duty transcended their original purpose, becoming sources of personal enrichment and joy that lasted well beyond the political circumstances that had created them.